Last year, Anne Woodward's daughter, Cinzia, fell ill. She kept coming down with a temperature, a running nose, and despite repeated trips to the doctor, no one could say what was wrong. Then last January, the family received devastating, life-altering news. Cinzia had been diagnosed with a rare childhood cancer. She died 22 weeks later, aged just 3 years old. Anne is from Blackbird Leys. She joins me in the studio now. Good morning, Anne.
Good morning.
Take me back to when Cinzia first began to get ill. What happened?
She kept coming down with like viral type cold symptoms, runny nose, temperature, vomiting, diarrhea. We would sort of be back and forth to the doctors because I was quite concerned that, she would sort of have one bout of it, 2 to 3 weeks later she would come down with it again. And over sort of an 8-9 month period, symptoms got slightly worse, and in September she had sort of another set of symptoms, which were the fixed staring eyes, very restless, obviously runny, and the same sort of runny nose and everything else. But I did notice at that time, because it was the swine flu, that they put that down to swine flu. And then she'd sort of bounce back, and then another 2 or 3 weeks later she'd be sort of back down with it again. But, the GP just said, she was at nursery. It was quite common for kids to be picking up everything under the sun. So you sort of put your trust in them and think, yeah, that's fine. And then just after Christmas, well, Boxing Day, she started getting poorly again. We noticed her tummy was very swollen, and very tired, again not eating, drinking, which was unusual. So I took her to the out-of-hours GP, and she could feel this lump in her tummy. Said she also had a temperature, but advised me just to give her Calpol and get her to see her own GP on the next working day, which I did. They thought it could be a kidney infection. So he gave her some antibiotics and said, bring back a urine sample. That showed she had high nitrates, which again is a sign of infection. So we left her on the antibiotics. She perked up really well by the end of the week, except her tummy was still very swollen. We went back the following week and thought that perhaps, she had feces still stuck in her tummy, which was what the original out-of-hours GP thought. So he gave a laxative. I wasn't convinced. But I thought, I was just being a bit of a paranoid mother. So we started on the journey of the laxative, and sort of midweek then I noticed this other lump on her side, and sort of thought, oh, I don't know, shall I take her to A&E? Am I being silly? Wait till Monday, we go back to the doctor and say, look, enough's enough, I think we ought to be referred. But it got the better of me, and on that Saturday we took her to A&E, and within 5 hours we were told she had neuroblastoma.
And what is neuroblastoma?
Neuroblastoma is a cancer of the specialised nerve cells. It mostly affects children under 2 years old, and in babies. And it's a development of the nervous system and other tissues. It can occur anywhere in the body, but most often occurs in the adrenal gland, in the abdomen. So that's where most children have their main tumours.
I wonder, you said that, and we know that young children, they get ill a lot. There's lots of things happen to them, and you don't want to be a nervous, paranoid mum. At what stage did it go through your head? There has to be more than just this.
I think when, like you say, her tummy had been swollen for the 2 weeks, and then I noticed this other lump come up on her side. But it was just sort of a combination of it. It just sort of seemed to be ongoing constantly. And for me, I just got to the point where, there has to be something more serious than just, a tummy ache or kidney infection, because her tummy was quite swollen and very solid. And sort of 2 weeks of medication hadn't solved that. But I think for me it was the new lump that I found on her side.
And when you got this diagnosis, what went through your mind?
To be honest, it just was a blur. I remember just standing there, and this lady who done the ultrasound said, you know, she'd got this mass, and my first words were, "Is that cancer?" And she said, "Yeah." And then she sort of mentioned this neuroblastoma. But to be honest, I just didn't take any of that in. It was just so overwhelming that you're suddenly, you know, you knew your child was ill. There was something wrong, but to be told she had cancer. And your mind just goes off in tangents, you know. It's like, oh my God, what's you think the worst. And then it's just a case of, you know, we were then sort of taken back through to A&E. We were then obviously waiting for other doctors to come back down and try and sort of explain to us what this was. But you just, like you say, it's just a blur. I can't, you know, everything was just such a blur for about a week after that. You know, because they're sort of saying, you know, we're going to have to do this test, that test, and but you just can't take it in.
And how long did you have left with her?
Initially, they for the 2 weeks after she was diagnosed, she had to have lots of tests, scans, biopsies, to confirm at what stage the neuroblastoma was, whether she had any secondary tumours in her body, whether it was in her bone marrow, and then from there they could then decide which type of chemotherapy she would start on. Cinzia was at stage 4, which is quite advanced, and had secondary tumours in her thighs and her pelvis, but she didn't have it in her bone marrow, which we thought was a bonus. We were given anywhere between a 15 and 20% prognosis of survival, but as the consultant said to us, every child deserves that chance. Right. So after the 2 weeks of all the testing, I think she started on the chemotherapy. And, you know, she was doing really well. We had a few problems along the way because obviously, you know, chemotherapy drugs have an endless list of side effects and problems. But she, you know, she did really well and coped with it all very well. And, you know, we thought we were doing very well. And she'd finished the chemotherapy. She had the main tumour removed. And they were just sort of preparing her ready to go into for her stem cell harvest, ready for the high dose chemotherapy. Right. So we had about a 6-week break, and it was just literally 3 days after her 3rd birthday that I noticed this lump on her neck, and within days she went downhill very quickly and died 2 weeks later. You know, it was that quick.
Sorry for your loss. But there's something positive has come out of this. You're now doing a lot of fundraising, aren't you? We're going to talk more about the fundraising that you undertake. For now, though, thank you. That's Anne from Blackbird Leeds with her story this morning on The Breakfast Show here on BBC Radio Oxford. Tell us what you've been doing to raise money.
We initially started off with car boot sales. To raise awareness more than anything is to, you know, to get the public to hear of this neuroblastoma, because most people will say pardon. Right. I've never heard of it. So we thought, you know, because I was obviously still very upset and going through the motions of losing Cinzia. So that was quite simple, straightforward, you know, lots of friends and family helped with that. So we done car boot sales.
What made you decide that because you could have just grieved and then try to get on with your life. What made you decide to start this fundraising?
For me, it was to focus on something more positive, instead of just dwelling on you know, that I'd lost my child, and just being so upset. You know, I mean, there was a lot of anger, frustration, and for me, it was to put that into some good energy, and for also to keep her name, her memory going. Right. And to raise awareness. That was the key issue. And because children with neuroblastoma can have their lives cut so short, as you know, like I did with Cinzia, there's not a lot out there for these children. So again, it was, you know, this particular charity was set up by a lady who lost her 19-month-old son to neuroblastoma the year before. So for me, it was like, you know, let's focus, let's make something positive out of this, and let's start raising some money to help another child or another family experiencing and going through what I went through. because, like you say, their time could be cut very, very short.
And doing this, raising awareness and raising money, it's not all doom and gloom, isn't it? Just looking at some information that I have here, you actually have quite a lot of fun.
Oh, we've had some excellent fun. I mean, we did a fancy dress in November, which raised nearly £1,500. You know, we've had a Health and Beauty Day. A lady, a friend of mine, you know, we did some health and beauty treatments. We've got lots and lots of things planned for this year. But I'm hoping to organise, like in between, obviously her birthday and her first anniversary, like a fun day, especially aimed at children.
Right.
And again, you know, raising the awareness of neuroblastoma and the signs and symptoms. So yeah, we've got a lot planned for this year.
And there's a website as well, isn't there?
Yeah, I set up the website actually before Cinzia died, and that was so that people could follow her story and you know, family and friends, because we were in hospital a lot. It was hard to communicate
Right.
with family and friends. So, you know, I set up this website so people could just go on when they wanted to and just, you know, be updated on her progress of where she was in her treatment, what was happening. Unfortunately, it was only set up about 6 weeks before she died. So it's sort of gone the other way now. I'm using it to raise awareness. There's still a lot of stuff to go on the website. You know, her story, her basic story of you know, from when she was diagnosed to when she died. Other organisations that, you know, help with children's cancer, Families Against Neuroblastoma.
Well, you better tell us what the website address is.
It's called Cinzia.com.
So Cinzia, that's an unusual name. That's spelled CHIN.
TZIA.
Cinzia.com. Okay, Cinzia, and that will also point people in ways that they can help to raise funds, will it?
That's right. Yeah, there's lots of information on there. There's, you know, the charity itself, Families Against Neuroblastoma, some of the charities and other organisations out there which helped Cinzia during her illness. So yeah, there's a lot of information on there and more to go on.
Good talking to you, Anne.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning.